It feels like the middle of the night for me. It's only 6:30 in the morning, but I'm so groggy this morning. Patrick Byrne, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, it's my pleasure. Feeling great. I'm in Vancouver, so it's 3:30 in the afternoon here, just about time for my nap. So.
3:30. So Pat, I've known you for must be 13, 14 years, maybe roughly, on and off. From when we did some work years ago in industry when you were with Fatigue Science. And so you've been working around the area of sleep for a long time. How did you get into this area of sleep, Pat?
Great question. It's not something I actually thought much about. My background really is in occupational hygiene and occupational health and safety. And so I worked in that profession for probably 25 years, never even heard about sleep. Then one day I had a young nephew who, driving home from work, working long hours Friday night, fell asleep, drove his car off a cliff and died. And shook me up, shook the family up. So I going like, what's going on? People can die from this? Like I assume you get tired, you just kind of, pull over and go to sleep. No, people die from it. And so I started looking into it. It took me years looking into it, looking at the U.S. military, looking at the research that was going on. And this is back, into the, late 90s. And there was virtually nothing going on. So eventually, I would caught up with, some great people like John Caldwell and Steve Hirsch and others that taught me a lot about the industry. So that's how I got into it.
Yeah, that's a very odd, it's a tragic path to come into sleep and a very odd way to come in. It's interesting because we ask people about if you get into a certain, industry, topic, speciality, not many people actually sit at school looking out the window dreaming about becoming an occupational hygienist or becoming a sleep scientist. It's not something you sit there and aspire to and go, oh, I can't wait to get over here so I can be a sleep scientist, So it's a kind of everybody's got a weird path of how to do it. But Pat, before you got into the sort of occupational health and hygiene and sleep world, is it true you had a try a stand-up comedy many years ago?
Yeah, many years ago is the operative term, I think. I was thinking about this the other night. My career path started out as delivering newspapers when I was 9 years old. To America.
Why couldn't you start when you were 6?
Good point. I think we probably had laws here. You have to wait till you're 9. So eventually I worked in construction for a lot of years, and then I went and did a master's in chemistry and got into occupational hygiene and worked in that field. Worked in asbestos litigation for a while in the States. Did a whole pile of different things, and one of my interests was stand-up comedy, and so I spent 4 years traveling up and down the West Coast of North America doing comedy clubs, and I enjoyed it. It was in the early days of comedy in the early 80s. And worked with a lot of good people who I still keep up with some of them. They had talent. They went on. I didn't. I went into sleep. So.
There's still time for you, Pat.
Yeah. You never know.
You tend to come up with a wisecrack every now and then, so it's pretty. You still have elements in it. Yeah. I was the same. I was a smart arse at school, but I didn't even get to do any stand-up. How do you reconcile the difference, Pat, between stand-up comedy and opportunistic comedy? So, for example, I like to sit in a conversation and wait for my chance to cut in with a smart arse comment and melt somebody. But how do you make that transition from that to stand-up comedy? What's the difference?
The difference is you're by yourself. You have to create both sides of the conversation, so that's harder, right? And you have to do a lot of thinking. In fact, probably some of the smartest people, with due respect to you, Ian, some of the smartest people I've worked with in the world have been stand-up comedians.
Yeah. So what happened to you then?
Yeah, I don't know. That's why I said I'm not in the business anymore.
All right, we're not going to spend an hour here taking the piss out of each other. So let's move on. So Pat, you got into the sleep world, obviously through tragic circumstances. And what was your sort of? You said about basically, improving and increasing your knowledge in this area with some people. What was the first kind of problems you started tackling or looking at that were in interest for you? Was it industrial? Was it sports? Was it general population, sleep disorders? Where did you first sort of start, biting into these problems?
Yeah. Well, as I said, my background was in occupational hygiene, and many people may not even know what that is, but it's part of occupational health and safety that deals with chemical exposure and dust and radiation. So if you want to know if somebody's exposed to noise, you have to be able to measure the noise, right? And you apply it to some standard, and then you get in and fix the problem. And it's the same with dust or radiation, all of that sort of business. So that's my background. I'm used to figuring out how to measure something that's a risk. So when I got into the sleep field, I just like running into a brick wall going, there's no way to measure the risk here. There's no way to measure sleep in the field. There's no way to measure fatigue in the field. It just looked like, quite frankly, the early days of ergonomics where everybody was kind of guessing on what to do, right? And so that's when I founded Fatigue Science and got into saying, okay, part of my research was, there were actigraphs around, research type actigraphs, and AMI out in New York. And so I bought some of theirs. The problem with that technology at the time was they were big and they're bulky and they weren't waterproof. And there was kind of like old tube TV, and you had to download the data yourself and analyze it to come up with a report. So after spending a week in New York with these guys, I came away going, there's got to be a better way to make this stuff work and automate it. So I founded Fatigue Science and got all the smart engineers to kind of figure out how to do that. So we would have a tool that we can actually measure sleep in the field in a relatively quick way and relatively accurate way, so that we can start figuring out whether the work we're doing and the interventions actually work. Actually succeed. So it's at the point now in that technology. So, we went from when I started, which was these big bulky watches that I would literally spend hours poring over the zeros and ones and trying to figure out if somebody is awake or asleep, to now, and I've worked with tennis players in Australia, and I work with some NBA players right now, and I can track their sleep in real time. Like they just wear the Ready Band. They don't do anything. They just wear it. It downloads to their smartphone, uploads to a computer, goes right to my computer. I wake up in the morning, flip over my laptop. I know how all my guys slept last night.
Okay. So you've got sort of data there that shows how they've slept last night over the last few weeks. So you can see if they've got any problems. So if an athlete calls you and goes, "Oh, Pa, I've had a bad night's sleep," you can log in and actually objectively look at it and say, well, in actual fact, you got 9 hours. It's not that bad. Relax.
Right. Yeah. Some of that, and some of it is, they'll go to sleep at 4:00 in the morning, and I'll just text them, to noon the next day, say, "Oh, what's going on?" Like, you couldn't sleep, you're partying. Like, I need to know what's going on. If you want me, you hire me to help you with your sleep, you got to tell me what's going on. So the technology itself has advanced quite a bit. Yeah.
And so as you kind of progressed through this world, Pat, over the last 20 odd years, and you saw and oversaw the development of wrist actigraphy, not only with the Ready Band, but you've seen a lot more coming in, the Fitbits, the Jawbones, and so on. What do you think has been the biggest learning for us in the last 20 years in terms of maybe industrial application of these things for sleep? What have we seen? Have we seen things improve? Have we seen mass changes, or has it got worse? Or where are we sitting, do you think?
I think we're starting at the, I don't know what the analogy is in the AFL, but in American football, it's like you're on the 1 yard line. You're just starting out. Yeah. Right. And I think that's true. I mean, industry, for the most part, really doesn't know what the real issue is. They know very little about the sleep patterns of their workers. They often don't even know what the risk is. So it's new. Sleep research is pretty new. I read something last month that said 80% of all of the published research dealing with athletic performance and sleep has been published in the last decade.
That's right, yeah.
Right. So it's all new. And in the industrial side, it's basically the same way. So it's all pretty new, and people are kind of feeling their way around. And I know very few industries that have really tackled the problem in an efficient way.
It's interesting, Pat, because I was doing some educational talks for a company recently, and we were talking about, we're going through this like 1.5 hour session about, what is sleep, what is fatigue, what are sleep disorders, that general kind of overview, which we would find quite simple. But still to this day, people were like, flabbergasted looking at this information, which is great because it just shows that we still have lots of just basic work to do to educate people. But what's really surprising, and it keeps surprising me over and over again, is that in certain industries, nothing has been done in terms of research. So classic one where I do a lot of work is mining, oil and gas. People have this idea that billion-dollar industry, billions of dollars actually, or there must be like scientists all over the world trying to improve this. Less than about 15 papers published on this subject. Nobody gets research funding that I know of. And anybody that's doing it is probably doing it as part of a PhD or, inside the company, maybe collecting some data. There's no systematic approach to this. There's no like research centers out doing it. And then where the research centers that are getting money, this is my kick in the head to academia, it's all these laboratory based hypothetical type things where we're not actually doing stuff out in the field. So I think in some ways power minus one.
Yeah, well, that may be true. Maybe the game hasn't started yet.
Yeah,
but and I think it has a lot to do with, I think, the goals that you and I have talked about over the more than a decade we've been working together off and on. Now is about solutions. You can measure the heck out of sleep and you can educate the heck out of people, but if you can't come up with solutions to the problems, you're wasting your time. So that's part of that's a bit of a roadblock for people because there's sort of a complete lack of education. And what I say to particularly the strength and conditioning people, the sports scientists in the sporting world, particularly in North America, is that this is an evolution. And we talk a lot about this in our book, particularly in Chapter 8, around the evolution of strength and conditioning. 40 years ago, nobody heard of strength and conditioning. There was no research going on, and so virtually, for the first probably 2 decades, virtually all the information about strength and conditioning came out of practitioners within the teams, gathering data, trying different things, sharing the information with their colleagues. Not published data, right? Virtually nothing was. More stuff's getting published now, but virtually nothing was published. And and certainly I spent 7 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks in the National Hockey League. There was virtually nothing published. There was nothing published about sleep and athletic performance then. But we gathered actigraphy data. We had over 7 years. We had close to 7,000 nights of good actigraphy data on the players, and we knew a lot what was going on. We had published the heck out of this stuff if the team let us, but they wouldn't. But they used that information internally to fix problems, and they were very successful at it. But so, I think part of what practitioners are not doing is they're not getting enough of their own data to do it, and they're relying on published data, and the published data just isn't there.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. I think that's the thing. And I think you said about the athletic research, for example, in the last 10 years, there's a paper done. I think we might be talking about the same paper done by Michael Estella.
Yeah, the UK one. Yeah.
No,
is it UK?
No, he's in Australia. But anyway, Michael, if it's the same paper, it's got like these kind of bubble graphs on it where all the research is taking place. Yeah, that one. And I was surprised because I saw my name on it, and I was like, Jesus Christ, is that all that's been done? Because if my name is featured on it, it must be pretty shit. We got a long way to go as one of the top research. So kind of that basically said that paper, the summary of that paper was, kind of 80-90% of that work, like you said, Pat, has been done in the last 10 years. 80-90% of that work has been done in Australia. And then it showed within Australia who's done it. And I was one of the people on the West Coast that, was in it, myself and Peter Eastwood, Madison Jones. And it just shows you how little has been done. But it's like we spoke about World Sleep a few years ago, all the money in sports as well. And you would think that people will be throwing money left, right and centre this problem with all the travel, all the jet lag stuff that goes on, all the travel fatigue, and still we grapple with this problem. And I hate to say this, and pardon the pun, I'm not sure when people are going to wake up to this and actually start tackling that systematically.
Yeah, it's difficult because they're getting away with it. It's a bit like having a fatigue. If you're a fatigued worker, and a shift worker, you show up every day. So what is a company car? Right?
Yeah.
Right. They don't see the downside to it. Although it's slowly changing, and I think we're a little bit anxious about seeing it move faster. But if you go back and look how long strength and conditioning took, 30, 40 years of research and, gathering data from practitioners to really kind of evolve where it is today. And they're still fighting today. I mean, they're still arguing over what's the right things to do and the wrong things to do in strength and conditioning. And that's after 40 years. Right?
Yeah.
So I think, you just keep plugging away. I mean, everybody wants, quick solutions and to move on with things. But, but I think as health and safety practitioners and as sleep practitioners or doctors like yourselves, I think we have some kind of an obligation to kind of push back on the press a little bit. I can't tell you how much I cringe every time I open up a magazine or newspaper and there's some article about some tips or hacks to get better sleep and quote some doctor. And my immediate reaction is that if your sleep can be fixed by hacks and tips, you don't have a sleep problem. You're staying up watching television too much. Get over it, right? People who have real sleep problems, and that's I think the real challenge for industry, is because sleep is such an integrated process, and it involves mental health issues, involves sleep disorder issues, organic diseases, lifestyle issues, and it's very difficult for corporations and practitioners to kind of tease through that and figure out what the core problem is.
Yeah, and it's a multivariate problem and multivariate solutions. And I think then on top of that, Pat, you spoke about some of the research. A lot of the research is pretty crap, including my own, I think, in terms of sports, because it's team-based research. So you're looking at the overall effect of a group. You're not actually looking at individuals. And that's the other thing I think in the last couple of years I've been thinking about, is we have to look more at individuals, because we're all very different, and the biological makeup of everybody and what we require is really different. So we can't assume that everybody's like a machine and needs like 7 hours and to kind of turn on and turn off, so we're not actually looking at individual performances that much really in sleep. Some people are starting to look at it, but that's an area I think that really needs to be looked at as well.
Right. No, I completely agree with you. In fact, one of the things that we did with the Vancouver Canucks, and I've done this with all the sports teams I work with, and I still do it today, is when I get the sleep data, it's between me and the athlete.
Yeah.
The team doesn't see it. The coach doesn't see it. Nobody sees it unless I want to refer them to a doctor. And so we get players buy in, and they're willing to accept advice and to tell you things. But if the team knows about it, then they they close down and they don't talk about it. I work with a Major League Baseball pitcher, is a very high level pitcher, and the team found out. I was working with him, but I would never say anything. The team found out he had a sleep problem. They traded him like the next day.
Really?
Yeah. So they don't have much tolerance for some of these things. So the athletes, I signed agreements with these athletes, and we're very careful about, the work that we do and working directly with these guys. And so that's part of the issue. And that's part of the issue in industry as well, in terms of gathering data, in terms of, really being conscious of the security issues and the disclosure issues for sleep data.
Yeah, there's something I think a little bit different about sleep, where I don't know how to describe it, but it's more like it's a very intimate process, and people are very, weary of having that data released. It's like when we did a study at the University of Western Australia where we brought like 25 elite rugby union athletes into the laboratory, and we monitored them overnight using PSG. It's quite a vulnerable position. I don't care whether you're like 5'10" and 70 kilos, or you're 6'10" and 200 kilos. When you're lying in your boxer shorts covered up with electrodes on you, and someone's watching you through a camera and watching signals, it's quite a weird process, And I think, for those guys, even they were quite worried that, information would be sent out, would be leaked out, something would happen, pictures would be taken. And we never did that. We reported. So there's where the benefit is of reporting group measures overall, but individual reports were given to show people what was going on. But you have to be very protective of that sort of data, and also that process, because you're quite vulnerable. You're in a state of unconsciousness, and so you got to protect that for future.
Right. And for athletes and for workers as well, it's one thing to monitor the worker or the athlete while they're playing or while they're in practice or whether they're working out, or when the guy's at work, seeing what kind of work practices they do. But you're talking about monitoring people at home. So you're looking at their lifestyle issues, the choices that they make.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, quite frankly, if you know how to read actigraphy properly, you can figure out whether somebody's had sex before they went to sleep. I'll teach you that someday.
No, it's all right, Pat. I actually, it's funny. I'm looking off here to the side because I actually made that comment. I made that comment to a guy. I said, "It looks like here on a Saturday night you woke up at 2:00 for a bit of hanky panky," and he goes, "How did you know that?" And I was like, there's a big burst of activity here. I said it lasted about 20 seconds. And he goes, "Oh, I think it was a bit longer than that." I said, "Yeah, it was about 22." But you can actually tell those things, yeah. But we don't actually know. Here's the thing: we don't actually know exactly what happened. The person could have got up because someone was knocking on the door. But if you throw out something, if you use kind of just generalities, and you see person's expression, you just kind of catch them out and think you're some sort of wizard where you can tell what's happening.
But I think just because of that, I mean, they're very skittish about having that any data of what they're doing at home and when they get up and when they go to bed and what their whole lifestyle is outside of the work environment or the sports environment. They're very reluctant to come forward and to be part of that. So that's one of the challenges.
Yeah, you have to build that, like you said, Pat, as well. You're basically at home with them as well, so you got to build that trust, which is different than measuring noise in a workplace.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You got to build that trust. So, Pat, over the years, like we said, you've been working with athletes individually. You've been talking to teams such as the Vancouver Canucks. You guys have done, the Fatigue Science Ready band has been in the NFL. It's been in the NBA. It's been used around the world. It's been used by the Wallabies here. I've used it a lot in my own research studies. I validated the device in the lab. Like it's a great device that has lots of application. But moving on from the device, you've recently written a book and published it, which is now on Amazon. Can you tell us about why you wrote that book, Pat? Why did you sit down with your inkwell and go for it? Because I know you're old school. You would have written it like that.
Oh yeah. No, I did. I wrote it on birch bark, which is kind of a North American tradition here.
On the back of a monk.
Back of a bar napkin. But and so when I founded Fatigue Science, and then in 2011, 2012, they decided that they would rather sell ready bands than to do consulting. And I started the business to create a tool for my consulting business.
Yeah.
Because that's where my passion is really about doing what we're doing, which is going out and working with people, whether it's in a mine or a sports field, and trying to improve their lives. So I went out on my own, which was pretty successful. I got involved with a lot of teams, but I also recognized that there was a lot of ignorance about sleep generally, and about how the whole sleep industry, how it had evolved, and how it kind of how it's new and how it kind of fits into what we're doing. So I said, I'm going to sit down and start working on this and sketch it. So I literally spent about a year off and on doing research. I mean, we had a stack of research that's probably like 3 feet high. I mean, literally like 10,000 pages of research we went through, and so I had all this, and I had a draft together. And then my daughter came home from law school in the States, and she got a not just a law degree, but also a sports law certificate, and was a senior managing editor of the Sports Lawyers Journal in the U.S. And that's an intern with the New Orleans Saints. And she came home and she read it and she started laughing at this crap. She says, "Let me edit it for you." So the two of us worked together for more than a year, and really, the writing style is, a lot of it's hers. The research is the stuff that I did, and so it was a good collaboration. But we wanted to get it out there for people to really kind of take a step back and take a look at sleep generally, how the whole thing evolved. I mean, you had a chance to read some of the, particularly chapter 2, which is, it's called "Sleep Comes Late to the Science Party." It's about how sleep research is so late coming in that most of the doctors practicing never had any sleep training in university. right? So all of this is new. So we wanted to kind of get that down, but we also didn't want to make it boring, and we didn't want to create not a podcast. We didn't want to create some bullet points for people. We wanted to get them a sense of the history, and so we did a lot of storytelling in there. Stories about the lives of the early researchers and how they stumbled into REM sleep, for example, or how they discover EEGs with Berger doing that, and I don't know if you know that story, which is fascinating because EEGs now, I mean, that's the core of how we measure PSG. So he was a soldier from Germany, in the 1800s, and he was a believer in telepathy. He thought him and his sister had this thing when she was miles away, they could communicate. And so he actually quit the military and then became a doctor, became a psychiatrist, and became a researcher trying to find these telepathic waves going back and forth between him and his sister. And so he was convinced there was some kind of electrical signals going off. And he actually found the low-level electrical signals coming off, the EEGs, which he named, but he thought it had to do with telepathy and not have anything to do with what's going on inside the brain. Fascinating discovery. And of course, everybody in the university thought he was a big crackpot. Right? Nobody, so he actually discovered it, wrote the paper, threw it in his top drawer of his desk, left it there for 5 years before he published it. Right. And then they still laughed at him. Right. And then it was another 5 years before it became mainstream. So, even that took, was a huge evolution. And he was so depressed out of all of that, he actually hung himself in his lap.
Jesus.
Right. And which is kind of ironic. We talk a bit about this in the book, was that the EEGs are actually used in some cases to actually help treat and diagnose depression. But so the book really deals with the history of sleep and history of science, and tries to help people who don't have time to read a lot of the research papers, to distill it down and give them some sense of the history and some sense of what works and what doesn't work. We talk a lot about sort of the fake products out there. Some of the ones that we've accepted as a society. So we shouldn't be, things like, lie detectors. Right, so we use that story. It's still you watch them. They're in movies. The police talk about them. The press talk about them. It's a complete fake technology, but it's been around for 100 years, right? And so we try to say, to people, pay attention to sleep technology in the same way. Be skeptical about it. I mean, all of this, the hype around sleep watches and Fitbits is, and what we say in the book is not that they're necessarily bad or they're not. Particularly, even if they're accurate, what are you going to do with the data? They are, we consider them to be like bathroom scales.
Oh, I totally agree, Pat. I think that's a great way of saying it. That's exactly what they are, yeah.
They're just a bathroom scale, but they're trying, and the reason people wear Fitbits and the reason people wear sleep watches who buy them from the consumer is because they think they have a sleep problem that they want to fix. They're not. They don't buy into this nonsense that these companies say, "Oh, this is going to help you." It's it's entertainment. It's good. No, people have sleep problems. They want to get them fixed, and sleep watches help you fix your sleep as much as weight scales help you lose weight.
I totally agree, Pat. And it's funny you say that because a few weeks ago, this guy was saying about a Fitbit, and he was asking some questions about the stages of sleep, and I was going, "Look, the stages of sleep on that thing." I said, are crap. Don't even worry about that. To get stages of sleep, you need to apply electrodes to the head and going through the whole kind of, with the EEG and all the different kind of channels you need. And I said about the data out of the device. And I said, so since you have all these problems, what do you do about it? He goes, I don't know. I'm not a sleep scientist. What do you do with the watch then? Like, what's the point? So it's a bit like what you said. It's like having a weighing scales, getting on every day and going, I want to be 80 kilos and I'm 90, but you don't know what's the interventions to reduce your calories, exercise, what in combination with how old you are, male or female, underlying health conditions. You don't actually know how to create the roadmap. So you go and you see a dietitian potentially, or an exercise physiologist, or both.
It has to be individualized, right? And the same with sleep watches. Right. Yeah. And the thing about these, and I say this a lot too, because I get a lot of questions about these sleep staging and these watches. First of all, it's crap technology. But the second thing I say to athletes is, even if it is real, what are you going to do about it? Like, really, you're going to go to bed at night and go, yeah, I think I'll get a bit more REM sleep tonight.
Yeah, you can't. You can't control it.
It's completely useless information.
Yeah.
To the wearer. Yeah.
And that's another question, Pat, I get, as people go, oh, it says last night I only got 15% in REM. How do I improve my REM cycles? I'm like, I'm a scientist and I don't even know. Like, you can't go to bed and say to your brain, hey, brain, tonight get REM. You can't, like, it doesn't work like that.
Right. And the brain decides what sleep stage you need. For example, if you look at Hans von Donigen's work, and some of the others, is that when you're completely sleep deprived, your brain goes right into deep sleep and stays there for a long period of time. Forget the cycles, forget the normal, the typical kinds of the cycle. Your brain decides what it needs and just does it by itself. And, don't mess with the brain, trust it.
So, Pat, speaking about sleep cycles, did you address sleep cycles, these 90-minute sleep cycles? Did you look at that in the book?
Yes. Yeah, we did.
So what's your evidence-based research, interpreted feedback opinion?
I think they're idealized, right? And the interviews that we had with the people that do the research in this area, they said it's more like a game of snakes and ladders. I don't know if you have played that game in Australia.
Yeah. We played it in Ireland, Pat. We're not that technical. See, this is the problem. You Americans, like you think that the whole world's behind you.
It is, yeah. You guys are way down there, I can tell. I looked at a map.
We play ladders and snakes over here.
Yeah, okay. That is simply, yeah, the water goes the other way, I guess. Yeah. But so the sleep cycles are really, I mean, what they teach people is really an idealized kind of system, and really the brain figures out what it needs at any point in time. And one of the analogies that I talk to athletes about is I play this little game with them. I say, okay, everybody, we're going to play this game like we did with little kids, and I'll sit around and see who can hold their breath the longest. Right? So everybody sit there and everybody, they breathe. And I said, you know why you breathe? Because your brain at some point will let you hold your breath and let you mess with your breathing. But when you deprive it of oxygen, your brain will take over and do what it needs. It'll make you, you can't commit suicide by holding your breath. Your brain will take over and do that. Yeah. Right? And sleep is exactly the same way. Your brain will let you mess with your sleep to a point, right? And then your brain will take over and do what it needs to do, right? And whether you're flying a plane or driving a truck or sitting on the couch, you can only deprive your brain so long, and your brain will take over and it'll figure out what sleep stages it needs to recuperate.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I think, like, coming back on that 90-minute cycles, while that's like average across the board that people move through different cycles, again, that inter-variability, and we've seen data, and I've seen data with like thousands of people here in our local lab. Some people are falling asleep in 10 minutes, others are 2 hours. So the average is 90, but everybody thinks, 90-minute cycles, if I get 4 of those, it'll be better than waking up in a mid-cycle. The other thing then is I have this app on my phone that measures my sleep cycles, and so there's all this kind of bullshit around it. And so I said to people, if we have people in a laboratory with all these electrodes on their head, and you've got a 99-cent app on your phone, which is sitting beside your bed, how do you think that's measuring your brain? Well, I don't know, but that's on, and there's this sort of nearly crazy belief that if someone says it measures sleep or does it, that there's some governing body that doesn't allow that to be approved. And this is the interesting thing, because there's always some, get out of jail free card, and all these devices are not medical devices; they're physical activity monitors. That's what they are at the end of the day.
Absolutely, and we talk a lot about the fact that the chapter in the book is called "Buyer Beware."
Yeah.
And we actually, one of the things we did in the book is we quote a comedian, stand-up comedian, quite a bit, and Stephen Wright. I actually never met the guy, but I've always been a huge fan of his, and he's a very funny guy, Boston comic. And he goes, I intend to live forever. So far, so good. So, how's your research going? And And so, I mean, we look a lot at the current technology and what sort of works and what doesn't work, and the science behind it, and quite frankly, most of it's still hype. I mean, the reality is people are concerned about their sleep, and the tech market has just kind of jumped on it and tell them what they want to hear, and sell them junk. They're selling them dreams.
But it's exactly your weighing scales analogy, Pat, is great because, if we look at society, particularly in the Western world, Europe, Australia, North America, people are getting heavier, people are getting bigger, but there's more weighing scales getting sold. So, people are kind of equating the measurement device as the intervention.
Right.
And so then people go, oh yeah, this is one I had recently, which actually was quite good. But what about drink driving? And I went, yeah. So there's more randomized breath tests or RBTs. And the numbers have gone right down. I went, yeah, but the consequence is different. If you get caught on an RBT, you go to jail, right? So it's different. If you get caught at work, not getting 7 hours of sleep, you don't go to jail or you don't get fined. I said, if we did that, it'd be different. And they went, oh yeah, you're right. So the consequence drives the behavior in that respect.
Right. And so what I say to people when they get I got the latest blah, blah, blah watch, and it's got all these, all this bling, and, it can do this and upload to my Facebook page and it'll tell all my friends. I'm going, yeah, that's like getting, a new bathroom scale that does all that for you. Every time you hop on it, it's got all this bling and bells and whistles, and it sends off your weight to your Facebook page and tells all your friends about it. I go, you still weigh the same.
Nothing changes. Yeah, you're just measuring it. Yeah, it's just a fancy way of measuring it. Yeah, it's quite interesting actually. Yeah. So Pat, did you address any interventions for for people, athletes, non-athletes, industry people, shift workers? Did you address that in the book?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So one of the biggest roadblocks, I think, in dealing with sleep is just diagnosis, because there are so many things that can go wrong, as it were, with poor sleep. So poor sleep, what we like to say is poor sleep is not a disease. Poor sleep is a symptom. And it's a symptom of a sleep disorder or a mental health issue or an organic disease or medications that you're taking or a lifestyle issue. So it's and other things, but it's a combination of any of those. So, a lot of people that do what I do in the field, their intervention is, have some sleep hygiene training and we'll, darken your bedroom. That's a solution. You have to figure out what the problem is first. If somebody's got sleep apnea, I don't care how dark you make the room, they still got sleep apnea, right? And so the challenge for interventions is to diagnose and to tease out and figure out what the core problem is or problems are, and fashion a remedy for that. That's the current challenge, I think, in this industry.
I totally agree with you. And some of the companies we work with, we do that. We have these kind of funneling systems, whether it's a technology picking up somebody, whether it's wrist-worn technology, in-cab technology, whether it's medicals, whether it's, random testing, or toolbox talks, whatever it is. There's kind of a funnel of people coming in, and then they complete a heap of questionnaires that then basically test their assess their pre-test probability, and then depending on a number of different factors, then they can go on and get a diagnosis, whether it's in a lab, whether it's a home-based study, whether it's like an actigraphy study over 2 or 3 weeks, whether it's a consultation to dig deeper, and then we figure out the treatment. And I think when we first set that up with some companies, they were very much like, right, well, that guy's got a problem. What do you do? It's like, well, wait, now, hold on. There's over 70 sleep disorders, and trying to isolate which one they are. I said, you don't walk into the emergency department and say to the doctor, I have a sore finger, and he doesn't look at you and he just bandages up your head and you walk out the door. Like, it's just, you need to systematically work through it. And your point there, John, Pat, is very interesting, because people's jaw drop when that happens about doctors not being trained in this area. You said about the scarcity of research or the evolution in the, like, people, when you tell people that REM cycles were basically only discovered like 50 years ago, 60 years ago, people kind of look at you as if, we've always known that. No, we haven't. And then when you talk about the amount of training that people get in sleep in medical school, people are flabbergasted, because it varies between nothing and a week at the max.
A week could be hugely generous.
Yeah.
The studies that have been done, certainly in Western medical schools, it's closer to 2 hours.
Yep.
Right? And we talk about that research in our book as well.
It's pretty appalling, Pat. Yeah.
It is. And when PSG, and it's certainly in North America. So when sleep studies, individual sleep studies, they're looking for sleep disorders, became in the late 70s, was started to be covered under health insurance.
That's right, yeah.
So all of these sleep labs popped up everywhere, right? And so the pulmonologists would set up clinics. It was unregulated, set up clinics everywhere. The psychiatrist would set up clinics everywhere. And my view of all of that was, it's an old saying, but if you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail, right? And so if you're a pulmonologist, everybody's got sleep apnea, and that's your total focus. I've sent athletes who I think have had some, I think kind of a weird, I don't know what it is, but kind of a weird sleep disorder. Send them to a PSG lab for a pulmonologist, and they come back with the one line saying he doesn't have sleep apnea.
Yeah.
So I don't care. There's 90 or 70 or 90 other sleep disorders. What about those? Oh, we didn't look at those. Well, what the hell did I send you? I mean, so so even the medical profession is evolving and growing around a lot of this, and even in the work that we do with athletes, there was a recent paper that came out. I think maybe this one I was referring to, one of the UK, that talked about all of the factors that went into creating poor sleep for athletes. Very recently, and they got this nice little wheel and shows.
Oh, that's that's the one. Is out UK. That's I think it's the guy's name is Walsh, and they did a consensus paper, a narrative review on athletes and sleep, and they have that wheel about the sports factors and the non-sports factors. Which we've often used in fatigue risk management systems. These lifestyle factors and other ones. Yeah.
Except, you know what? They don't mention once mental health.
That's right. Yeah.
Not once. It's a huge issue in professional sport, even in college sports. Right?
Yeah.
They don't mention it. But again, it's because people look at the sleep issue through the lens of their own history and their own education. Right? And it's hard to look at these as holistic problems and understand that there are, like they say, lifestyle issues and biological issues, mental health issues that all have to be looked at carefully when you're looking at somebody's sleep.
Yeah. And this is where I think, like, I'm a big fan of crossing domains. So this as well, Pat, that, basically within the sleep world, that even if you go to a sleep expert, using air quotes, they may not be an expert to actually work with athletes or to work in the field. So you get a person who works in a laboratory assessing people for sleep disorders, you put them in a field and not in a field, but in their field with a mining company or an oil and gas company and ask them to redesign your rosters or look at how this integrates with your safety management system. They won't have a clue what you're talking about. That's a very applied chronobiologist kind of consulting type. That's a kind of a combo between a business person and a scientist, where you and I kind of fall. So there's not very many people that do that. But my point is that you got to find the right person as well to help you in the right situation. It's not always the right, it's not that all sleep people are in this bucket that can help. So depending on whether it's athletes, whether it's industry, whether it's a laboratory, and people need to kind of stay in their own lane. And I've seen examples of that where sleep physicians have gone into companies and the company's gone, oh, how do we do our rosters? And the physician then just goes, well, just test everybody for sleep disorders. And it's like, that is fucking ridiculous. That is a waste of time and a waste of money.
Yeah. I've seen that a lot. And we we criticize this in our book as well, where, these supposed sleep doctors, and I'll tell you where a lot of this came from, and certainly North America. When I started with the Canucks in 2008, nobody was doing this in sports, like literally nobody. We had to kind of create our own roadmap with this. And the Canucks were, as an organization, were so happy with the results, and the players were so happy with the results. They actually came to me into Fatigue Science and bought for 3 years exclusive rights to use our technology and systems, so that we couldn't work for any other teams. And what happened then was the press started calling me then a sleep doctor, which I'm not. But then, so what happened, all the local teams, like the teams in New York, they would go to the local sleep doctor and say, well, come help us. This guy in Vancouver's doing it, so come help us. They don't know what the hell they're doing. Yeah. And these guys were like literally handing out melatonin like candy to these guys for long haul flights. They don't have a clue what they're doing. Right? Yeah. I mean, and so what I said to sports teams is, look, think about sleep doctors like you think about orthopedic surgeons. You hire an orthopedic surgeon to get in, they're trained to fix and repair broken bones, basically. Like break their industry, break their world down. But that's what they do. Sleep doctors are trained to diagnose and treat sleep disorders. Right? You wouldn't bring in an orthopedic surgeon to help you with an industry, for an accident prevention program. That's not what
exactly.
they do.
Yeah.
They fix the consequences of it. And it's the same with sleep doctors. They fix the consequences of poor sleep. They don't know how to necessarily get in and do the kinds of interventions for prevention.
Yeah, I think you're right, Pat. I think a word I would say to companies or athletic teams or whoever it might be is make sure that you get the right person to do the right job. And if you're unsure, ask someone who is qualified in the field that you have respect for. And if not, you can always send us an email here. We'll tell you where to go or where not to go in terms of the person you're looking for. But you make another interesting point, Pat, where someone's calling you a doctor and you're not. There is many people out there today who have no qualifications in this area or no even tertiary qualifications, and they're calling themselves a doctor and allowing people to call them a doctor. So there is charlatans in this world that are out there offering advice and the wrong advice. So you need to be very wary in this area.
I'm very careful about that. I still got a lot of the athletes I work with still call me Doc or Pat, right? and it's a bit of a more of a running joke than anything. But I'm very careful. And one of the other reasons we were talking about why we wrote the book was I think this, even in industry, this will give them a good sense of what's real and what's not real out there in the sleep world, and what to be aware of, and where the state of the research is, and it discusses what we apply in sports applies in industry as well.
Yeah,
the only difference is the uniform you put on and how much you get paid.
Or the amount of shit you have to eat every day.
Yeah.
So Pat, if people want to find your book and delve more down into this rabbit hole, where can they find it? And more importantly, what is the title of the book? Do you have a copy there you can show us?
I do. It's called Inconvenient Sleep. Why teams win and lose.
Inconvenient sleep. Huh?
Sleep.
Yeah.
And a lot of that came because a lot of the athletes we work with find sleep inconvenient.
It wasn't a play on Al Gore's Inconvenient Truth, huh?
Yeah, that's a little bit.
So where can people buy your book, Pat? Where is it available?
It was available in paperback and in not audio, paperback and in electronic version, virtually anywhere you buy books, Amazon, Kobo, literally anywhere in the world you can buy it.
Yeah. And if you can't use the internet, just scroll down here in the show notes for this episode and there's a link there. We'll put a few links in there where you can go and buy that book. Is it going to be an audiobook, Pat? We're going to hear you...
No, you're gonna hear my voice. I put myself to sleep. That's how I put myself to sleep. I start talking.
I listen to my podcast.
There you go. There you go. We haven't thought. We'll see what the uptake is on it. We get a lot of good reviews, particularly from people that do the kind of work that we do in industry, and they go, yeah, finally somebody is opening up the curtains and saying what works and what doesn't work here.
Yeah. So. Excellent. All right, Pat. Well, thank you very much for your time. We will put the link to the book in the show notes. And if people, Pat, want to get in contact with you, maybe to do some work or to talk more about the book, maybe for other media opportunities, but more importantly, to do some work with you, do you have a contact details or a website that people can go to? We do, and you can tack that on to the end of the podcast. Yeah, I'll send you the link to the website. All right. So what's the website called? It's Byrne, BYRNE -co.com. Byrne-co.com. Okay, we'll put that in the show notes as well. Okay, sounds good. I'll email it to you just so you make sure you got the right one, because we tried to make it as difficult as possible so people couldn't find it. With that, Pat, we'll end our recording. Thank you very much. My pleasure, Ian.